Hey guys, welcome back to Ad Lib Talk, and this is my review for Mortal Kombat. Wooden acting, terrible writing, gory action. If you had to ask me for a quick summary of what this movie is like, those are probably the three phrases I would mention first. Listen, I have noticed quite a few people have been quite forgiving with this movie, considering how many terrible elements it does have. I'll be going into that in a very short time. But although it's not as bad as I thought it would be, that does not mean it's good. It's not as bad as something like Alone in the Dark, for example, or the 1995 Mortal Kombat. But let's be honest, that doesn't make this movie any better. I will not spare this movie from criticism, so if you're one of those sort of video game fans who cannot hear any criticism about Mortal Kombat, you've been warned. I would also be wrong to say that I hated this movie. I did quite enjoy certain elements of it, as I will explain in my review. But before we get into the nitty-gritty of this review, don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoy it, and please do consider subscribing. Those are the two main ways you can help support my channel right here on Ad Lib Talk. Cheers, and let's get right into that review. So Mortal Kombat is directed by Simon McQuoid. This is actually his directorial debut. It's a screenplay by Greg Russo and Dave Callahan, and obviously it's based on the video game franchise of the same name, which was created by Ed Boon and John Tobias, and it's basically an attempted reboot of the original Mortal Kombat film series. It stars a number of decent actors: Louis Stan, Jessica McNamee, Josh Lawson, and many others. It starts in 17th century Japan, where we see Bi-Han and Lin Kuei, assassins who attack and kill Hanzo and his family. Hanzo's daughter, however, is hidden, and she survives and then is eventually saved by Raiden, who takes her to safety. This then leads us on to the present day, where we get to know that a deathmatch tournament called Mortal Kombat take place, and apparently the Earth realm seem to be on quite a long losing streak. Apparently they've lost 9 out of the last 10. However, this might all change, because there obviously is an ancient prophecy that states that the blood of Hanzo Hasashi will be the one to bring victory for the Earth realm. Now, this might have seemed impossible, because everyone thought that Hanzo Hasashi's bloodline was dead. But we meet MMA fighter Cole Young, who is one of those sort of fighters who's used to getting beaten for money, and he of course has no idea that the blood that runs through his veins is the blood of Hanzo Hasashi, and he is obviously destined to bring victory to the Earth realm in the Mortal Kombat tournament. Anyways, he is attacked by one of the Outworld's Emperor Shang Tsung's famous soldiers. His name is Sub-Zero, very infamous Sub-Zero, but he and his family are saved by Jax, who leads them to Sonya Blade. Now, this is just the start of the narrative, and obviously, as you can start to tell, it's nothing but confusing, especially if you're not a fan of the video games and have no idea who these characters are. And lots of new names, lots of new characters, lots of lore, and if you're lost by now, I completely understand. The narrative is quite stale, pretty predictable, boring, and to be honest, just plain bad. Many people will state that you watch this movie just for the action set pieces and the gory finishers. I personally am incapable of watching a movie just for one of its elements. If I'm watching a movie, I'm going to judge it as a movie. And to make matters worse, after this, the narrative takes a turn for the worse, because it wastes almost like 30 minutes on a training sequence that really slows down everything. Now, one could have hoped that this time would be spent during the training sequences, of course, to build and develop interesting characters. Characterization for some of our heroes and villains would have helped quite a bit to improve the quality of this movie. Unfortunately, none of these characters seem to have any kind of personality or any interesting traits, which means that we never really care about what they're doing or about them at all. One of the main reasons this sort of could be that this movie was made with fans in mind. So you're sort of expected to know who these characters are. I'm sure fans of the series will love it, and I'm sure fans of the series loved watching this movie. I, as a sort of person who has dabbled a little bit here and there with the games, but I'm no big fan of Mortal Kombat, I am aware of some of these characters, but for myself, many of these characters are just, who the hell are they? And I really don't know much about them. I want to know more about them, but the movie just does not give me anything at all to learn about them. On the other hand, let's talk about the acting now. Acting is mostly wooden, but it's not terrible. Some are better than others. I think my standout performance was by Josh Lawson. He makes the character Kano so easy to hate, and let's be honest, Kano was the only character who was given any kind of sort of development or interesting traits. He also has pretty much every single memorable moment of this movie. For one of those memorable moments was a very funny one when he actually discovers what power he has, and that is one of the very few moments that I also laughed during this movie. I have to be honest, apart from Lawson, apart from the character of Kano, nothing really stands out. Everyone is taking this far too seriously, and that is to the detriment of this movie. Needless to say, in a video game movie, actors are not helped by the dialogue. And once more, yes, we have very stale and very predictable and sometimes very awkward and cringe dialogue. Characters say the usual sort of like serious phrases we've come to expect, and it sometimes had me just shaking my head, thinking just how uncreative and uninspired it all is. Now, what is definitely inspired in this movie are the special effects and the action sequences. Once the action starts to pick up, right around the hour mark, things start to improve and become much, much more interesting. I'm glad the action here is, on the most part, quite clear and quite clean. This is not to say it is flawless. Much of the action still has a bit too much editing for my liking and far too many cuts. But apart from that, the true enjoyment in this movie are two things: the superpowers and then the eventual fatalities. It's gory, it's gruesome, and it's fun to watch. I loved it. That part is really, really good. Flawless victory on that aspect. It's all great to look at on the most part. Visually, this movie is pretty good, and fans of the game will definitely not be disappointed by the ice effects or the fire effects, for example. And like I said, some of those finishers really, really are impressive to see on the big screen. Now, when it comes to rating a movie like this, it is a similar problem I had when I rated Godzilla vs. Kong. I honestly did not hate Mortal Kombat, although I have criticized it quite a bit. It has some pretty decent action and some nice visual flair, which offers something different to the usual action schlock. But the characters are so boring, so sort of uninteresting. I just don't care about them at all. The narrative is so uninspired. I obviously just cannot give this a good rating. At the end of the day, this is a movie for the fans. If you're not one, you will probably not enjoy it. So finally, what rating will I give Mortal Kombat? I give Mortal Kombat a 2 out of 5. Thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed that review. If you did, don't forget to check out my other reviews and my other videos on video games and movies, all here on AdLib Talk. Cheers, and I'll see you guys next time right here on AdLib Talk.